Are the Pacers turning a corner? Are they not playing that well? What's going on and what is to make of their recent stretch? Plus discussion of Tyrese Haliburton, the team's injuries, and so much more with the great JMV on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, a new guest is joining us to break down the state of the team right now. 2 wins in a row, but not 2 wins that I don't think anyone feels great about. They'll take the wins, given how they played to start the season, but uninspiring victories over the Wizards and Pelicans. It's JMV from 107.5. The Fan at the late hour always crushes. Love the way that he talks about basketball and plays quite often. We dive into so many things about the Pacers right now. 2 wins in a row. Are they turning any corners? Is anything getting better, or have they just survived 2 crummy teams? Plus, Tyrese Haliburton's recent play. How much have injuries actually impacted what they're doing? What it all means for Myles Turner, who I think JMV made a great point, is a very central focus of the way injuries have impacted the team. And what would it take for fans and anyone to feel better about this team and how they're playing the rest of this homestand before they have a little bit tougher of a road trip coming up? We get into all that today with JMV. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's just dive right in. The great JMV is here, I believe, first-time guest. You know him from 107.5 The Fan. You've heard us talk together many a time in the late hour on that show. JMV, how you doing? Are you enjoying the Pacers right now? They've won 2 in a row, but I don't think anyone feels particularly great about those 2 wins.
No, because I'm going out on a limb here. I absolutely was in love with everything. All the off-season moves, building within. I want this thing to work really, and I've said this before, Tony. I want this thing to work more than anything I've ever wanted to see work around here. And believe me, we've been around here long enough to know that most things don't work around here. We've seen it all too. It's all too familiar with both our professional teams, certainly in recent history. And I wanted to see this work because the guys, they're good dudes, and they have a lot of fun when they play well. But that's the difference there, right? When you don't play well, you kind of look like they did in that whole body language thing on the bench when they lost to Miami in one of the more embarrassing performances we have seen at home in a long time, almost a couple of weeks ago now. So, I'm not having fun. I'm holding out hope that they're going to get into gear. But it's weird because considering, Tony, where we were this time last year and how much fun this team was kind of rounding into form, Tyrese Haliburton was rounding into, what we become known for, I guess, as far as the NBA is concerned, that elite level player. And they just can't they can't extend any relatability, connectivity to winning. I know they've won 2 straight, but my God, they had to survive that crap mess against the Pelicans on Monday night, and they're awful. Didn't have anybody out there, so yeah, I've wanted this to work. It really hasn't so far. That's unfortunate.
What I've been trying to kind of figure out in my own head is, right, everybody kind of knew that last year compared to this year would be different just because of expectations alone.
Sure,
right? The feeling of last year, I think their Vegas line was like 38.5 or something. That team's not expected to be great. And they won 47 and had the in-season tournament. And obviously the playoffs were what they were. And this year now, even if no one thinks the conference finals is like a reasonable goal, there are expectations to be a good team every night. Yeah. And so on one hand, that's not happening. So is that why it's felt so clunky and frustrating and disconnected at times? Or is it literally like the product on the floor hasn't been as fun? And both of those things are accurate, right? Last year they were a top 2 offense. This year they're barely average. And so I think it's a little mixture of both where, some of it's Haliburton. He hasn't had the same, recently he's been better, but hasn't had that same level of joy. And a lot of the guys that they wanted to bring back because of how the vibes were last year that made it a joyous team, haven't played as well. Like it's all just felt a little different. And so I'm wondering what this stretch will mean. And I want to talk about it in a second. Yeah. If they win, even if it's ugly, like, do they feel better about it enough to get some joy back? Because it's been very interesting early in the season that they just, for whatever reason, even when they do play well-ish, it hasn't quite felt the same, if that makes any sense.
I think this should be the ramp, and you and I have talked about this too. Basically it was the Milwaukee game moving forward that this stretch all the way up until mid-December needed to be their ramp
Yeah.
to get back to living up to the expectations. And we all know where that starts, because it's sure as hell never going to start defensively, because they're still really bad at that and can't stay in front of anybody. But it starts offensively. And I don't know, Chad Buchanan and I talk about this more than occasionally. And is it the defenses that have caught up to it? Is it the fact they have guys out? Or, as I have put it, does it all start with Tyrese Haliburton, Tony? He's the orchestrator. Tyrese Haliburton, for this team to be at its best, he has to be orchestrating for others, getting others high percentage, comfortable looks in their comfort zone. And he also has to put up numbers. Until recently, he's been awful. He has been awful, whether or not it's a back situation and there's an injury going on, or if other teams have caught up. But you and I came up with this philosophy last year. If you ain't doing 110, you're not going to win. And you've got to keep up that pace. And I loved how they brought everybody back, because everybody was comfortable. Everybody always wants to say, Tony, in basketball, I want to play that pace. I love to get up and down on offense until your ass is thrown into it, right? And you go, oh, my God, I'm gassed. I can't keep up this pace whatsoever. And I'll be honest with you, at times, that's kind of how it looks. It's kind of how it looks. And to me, it all starts, and I know you're saying, well, you're putting all this on Tyrese. That's the territory in which he's in right now. That's a part of being an elite level player. And I think he understands that. He even said that, I think, after the New Orleans game on Monday night, that, people are counting on him. And I think he was talking about the fans and certainly his teammates to perform at a high level every single night. And when he doesn't on the offensive end, he's going to have a significant problem, because he can't make up for it, nor can they on the defensive side. And I think that is what we've seen so far. They just have not consistently neared the pace that is necessary for this team to be good. And this is going to be the sluggish attempt at winning games that we're going to see until that changes, until they become more consistent. Because with this group, it is all about offense. And we know this, guys feel better offensively when they play well, and they feel better defensively when they play well. Nobody, I think, more than Myles. I mean, Myles wears his emotions on his sleeve. You can tell.
Fourth quarter last night was loud.
Yes. Yeah. And I've always said this about him. He couldn't play poker. He wouldn't be good in rounders, man, because you can read his body language every single time. And I'll give you some examples of that coming up later on. I've become very good in Myles, right? In the world of trying to explain Myles to everybody here. But he's just like one cog in this whole wheel, one spoke in this entire wheel, that if Haliburton doesn't set him up for success, then likely it's going to be very difficult for these guys to set themselves up. So it all starts with Tyrese Haliburton, and that comes from the territory of being an elite level player, both on the court and in the checking account too.
Yeah, Halliburton's a huge part of them not being the second best offense this year. And like in the playoffs, they're the best, right? Like obviously a major, huge part of it. The thing that's been so jarring to me is last year they had that 99-point game, and then every other game they were at 100 or more. And you said it. We always talk about if they hit 110, they had a chance. And that wasn't always a win, but they had a good chance. And they got to that 60 plus times. They've already had games this year with 90, 94, 98, 83 in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So, I understand what Haliburton struggles mean for that. But to go from what they were last year to that is their bench is worse. They're really banged up. There's a lot of layers to this that come with it. Also, you mentioned that guys always say they want to play faster. I would like to give a guy that we saw last night, Daniel Tice, a lot of credit, because last year when he was coming back from injury, he's like, I'm not going to be able to play more than 5 minutes. It's going to be too fast for me. I was like, okay, I appreciate that kind of honesty.
Everybody in theory wants to play. I got to play fast. I'm going to get more offensive opportunities. Then you go, oh, hell, I got to run the floor now all the time too, man. I got to keep up with all these dudes. And it's consistent. If they fall off of this, Tony, we've seen it this year. If they fall off, they're just simply put not the same team. They're not the dangerous team, and they're not going to live up to the expectations we have.
So this stretch right now I want to talk about, They played good in the second half against Milwaukee, which, whatever, that doesn't really count. They didn't win, but they did play well. And then they've won 2 in a row, but not played particularly well against Washington and New Orleans. Haliburton has been good for all of that stretch I just described. And so I know that they need to look better in these next 2 at home, especially if they get back to 500. I think people care more about how they looked than the results. I think you've kind of answered this with the way you talked about it, but do you view what they've done so far in this homestand as them or even Haliburton turning a corner in some way, or do you think they've just kind of scraped by some ugly ones and need to figure something out? Hey, y'all, quick little break here to talk about two great groups of people. First up, the good folks at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%, because Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boosts on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth, and these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here. With Robinhood Gold, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. We also need to talk about FanDuel. The great folks over at FanDuel will get you ready to tackle the NFL and NBA seasons on FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. That is on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. They give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and on the NBA, all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you know what's coming. Well, you can bet on it and see the latest stats from the action, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you would place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. How about that? That's on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
I think, Tony, baby steps category. I think you can put it like that, right? I mean, they're in the right direction, because it could be worse. We didn't think it could be worse after that Miami home game on a Friday night, or in Charlotte, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. But it could get worse. It would have been worse last night, or Monday night, if you will, wherever you're watching this, whatever day you're watching this on Monday night. It could have been worse if they lost to that New Orleans team that had dudes that basically nobody's ever heard of playing in the rotation last night for the Pelicans and Willie Green. I think it's going to take more than this, but it's just a level of consistency, because you had a lot of people buy into you, and really we're a short-term decision-making society. And I mean, I'm the head of it 3 hours a day. I've got to make hey, are they any good? Or are they not forever? And is Anthony Richardson going to be good? He's played like, a handful of games. How are you going to know? But you have to make that judgment, and people have made their judgment about this team not being the same. Because I'll be honest with you, Tony, I think a lot of people thought that maybe it was lightning in a bottle a year ago, and then things went their way. They got the injuries with Milwaukee, the injuries with New York. You get all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think people thought that they were a very fortunate team. And they're battling. I think there's one thing to say about this. There's no good fortune this year with injuries. We've seen that. I mean, you get Neesmith stepping on the damn coach. Willie Green's foot, whose ass was on the floor. It shouldn't be, but whatever. And then Neesmith, Nembhard. Obviously, the two backup bigs, too, with Jackson and Wiseman in here for a second. So that's been different. And I will give them credit if they're able to battle through here and come out on the other side. I'm a big fan of Shawshank Redemption. And when Andy Dufresne escapes, it was, described as, he had to sift his way through 500 yards of smelling foulness to get to the other side. I think this is kind of like Shawshank Redemption right here. If you can get through here and play consistent basketball and make believers out of people again, the start, I think, will be easily forgotten. It's just they give us too many reasons to have such memories. Even last night in a win, I think people are still saying, this is not the legit team I thought it was going to be until further notice.
Teams can climb out of slow starts and be like, okay, but it's very rare for dramatic turnarounds, right? Last year, the only team that did it was the Clippers. And it don't get me wrong, it's possible. Like, there's a team every year that does it. But, there's a reason that the first 20 games is kind of used as benchmark. So that's why I think this stretch is so interesting, because when I saw this part of the schedule, and I was talking about it with somebody after Milwaukee, it's like they need to just play better. Like, obviously they need to win at least 3 of the games to feel good about their record, but they need to come out being like, okay, we figured out something, or we solved something. Like, we're playing better basketball than we were before it started. Because then when it gets hard again and they go on the road with, a Toronto team that just kicked their butt, and a Brooklyn team that's kind of good, and a Memphis team that is good, and Chicago where they never seem to win, like they need to be playing well, or that will not go well, and it won't matter that they won a bunch of games in this stretch, right? So I kind of think that the most important thing that's happened in these two games is Haliburton's looked good in both, primarily like two of his best shooting games of the season, and the offense looks like last year's offense, even though in general they haven't looked very good. Their bench has not been even close to as good as last year, for example. Mathurin was awesome to start the season. To his credit, he had to play 80 minutes on a back-to-back. I get that he was totally gassed in the New Orleans game, but didn't look like he did in some earlier games this season. Like, they need to figure a little bit more consistency out, even though the wins are important. But you mentioned something else I want to get to, which is the injury thing. Their superpower was this depth, right? Like, their bench was amazing last year, and we thought before the season, man, like Jarris Walker might not play again, or like someone's not going to play. And all of a sudden, it's like, can they feel the team? And so where do you land on how much injuries have actually held them back this year? Because even though they've been hurt, there have been some games where I think, yeah, they're really banged up and they're playing a lot of two-way guys, but they also still should have had enough talent to be better than the product they had out there.
Let's just say this. They shouldn't look as bad as they do. I mean, even with the guys that have been out, let's just say that, because they're not getting consistency. I think also, and this is something we can get into as well, it is a product. Remember all of this euphoria and love affair we had with this team. There's no doubt it was taken to another level when they made that deal in January from Pascal Siakam. But, Tony, that made them certainly slightly different than what they were up until that point. I mean, they were up and down the floor, and Buddy Hield stopping and popping threes. And, you know, he's out there running, never getting injured, never stopping running. And you get Siakam, man, and I love Siakam, but his game is completely opposite of what they really want to do. Somebody had mentioned to me, I can't believe that Myles Turner doesn't get the post. He's got to be in the post. You need a post man. I said, hey, numbnuts, you got a post man. Look at Siakam's numbers. I think in the post, his numbers are what, top 10 in the NBA as far as post play? This team can only have one offensively, and that wrecks the works right here. So I don't think we fully factored in the effect on what we fell in love with last year before that trade, even with the multitude of injuries, and try to figure out exactly what is the best way to be yourself and do what you do with pace offensively, also utilizing, obviously, one of your best players that you acquired last year in Pascal Siakam to the best of his ability. I think that is a delicate balance right there, Tony.
They were like, I could tell they were figuring that out the first, I'd say 8 to 10 games before they kind of skidded on that road trip, when their best two players were Mathurin and Siakam for a lot of their games. And those two fit what you just described. Like, they're a little slower, catch, turn, face, see what's going on, and not just keep the ball popping. And like, that can work. We saw it last year, right? But it does require different things. And that's why the conversation with Mathurin has always been blending what they do with what he does. And now this year they had to kind of flip that discussion because of how good he was playing early when they weren't playing with the same pace. And I do think injuries have impacted their pace, not significantly, but like Aaron Nesmith is always energy, fast, speed, move, boom, 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 battle on defense. Andrew Nembhard's just a ball handler. And I know that he wasn't starting great this year, but Carlisle loves 2-point guard lineups for that exact reason. You can always have someone to pressure the rim, even if there's an insanely good defender on one of the other guards. So, again, like, they get in Toronto, they had Haliburton and Siakam, and no Scotty Barnes was playing. Yes, injuries were a huge factor in the rotation they put out there. Tristan Newton made his NBA debut that night. They still should have won that game. Like, there's been a bunch of games like that. And I think the reason people, including me and sometimes the Pacers, can't get there with like, oh, injuries are killing us, is because Haliburton and Siakam have played every game this season, right? The two guys that they would need the most have played every night. So I do think you're right that, you know, the way they're hurt and who's been available does, like, they have the stylistic clash they're working through with different resources. Quentin Jackson has been great, but him starting 4 times, are you kidding? Like, who had that on the bingo card this season? You know, they've had to work through a lot in terms of what those kind of injuries plus style right now is making them do.
I got something for you. And I mentioned I think I can tell how Myles is going to go and how he's not going to go at times by watching him so much as I have. But I think I can tell about this offense, and I think we have seen it more times than not this year. They run high ball screen action with Myles, and you can absolutely tell this. He's just not getting the ball rim running as much as he used to. And I know that that's a defensive adjustment. They've kind of clogged things up and made the Pacers decide, like, Myles would either pop and get hit for a three, or would dive to the rim and would have something going to the rim. He kind of gets caught in no man's land far too often, somewhere between the free throw line extended and the 3-point line, where if you're in the same general vicinity, if two guys, can cover, two certainly, but three even at times, if you're all kind of staying compacted together. And I think part of that is that Tyrese has been unable so often to turn that corner. Like, he creates that mismatch with that orchestration, with the jump pass and deciding whether it's a kick out to the corner on the skip, or, maybe to the wing, or it's Myles diving, or it's, Myles picking and popping back. And when Tyrese doesn't turn that corner and find the offensive guy, that takes away quality looks that they got last year that they're not getting this year. And I think that's part of it. And with Myles, you can tell he's just simply put not getting the ball as much off that high screen and roll stuff as he did a year ago. And you could tell, I went to that Miami game and sat up front, and he started with the hands, body language. He knows this, that he's looking for it from Haliburton. He looks for it from McConnell, and he knows straight he's not going to get it when it's Mathurin running a ball screen with him. He knows there's no way Mathurin is going to deliver the pass, because Mathurin is more about trying to do whatever he's doing against his defensive players. Very much like when you ran Myles in some similar action back when Malcolm Brogdon was here, and he basically knew he dove just for S's and G's, man, because he knew he was never going to get it. He knew Brogdon was going to dribble the air out of it or take it on his own and try to lay it up or get to the foul line. That's what Myles has reminded me of at the start of this year with that body language, because he's not getting it to a point, not become the option that he was a year ago, to where you can see him in some games, Miami certainly, as I described, becoming frustrated, and he's shown it.
He even said that, right? After his big game.
That's why he had to apologize. That's why he felt compelled to say, hey, my body language, and, he was taught, and that's what it was. You could see him. Tony, I sat in the second row behind the scores table after that game, and I sat there until the ushers made me leave, because I thought, sure, somebody come back out and do something, right? Because it was so bad across the board. I thought somebody's going to come back out here and get some shots up or something, and I'm going to check it out. But you could tell the body language, the connectivity, it was vacant in that game. And we've seen that. That's been more familiar than we have seen in the past. And that's what happens when the offense that was fluid a year ago you had fun with because it was producing is not at nearly the same clip this year. And that leads to the frustration oftentimes we've seen both collectively and individually with this group.
One more break here, guys. Got to talk to you about the great people over at BILT, because PSA for anyone who rents. If you haven't heard of BILT, you're about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through BILT. You don't even have to check with your landlord to start earning points that you can use towards flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. Let me break it down for you. There is no cost to join BILT. As a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. BILT points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 properties around the world you can redeem BILT points towards. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences only BILT members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? BILT is the place to do it. Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA today. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA to start earning points on your rent payment today. You picked a tough game to sit in great seats.
Lord have mercy. I'm about to get sick. I was about to get sick. It was so bad.
That was awful.
Yeah.
I've never seen any coach call 3 timeouts that fast in that third quarter. That was, that was unbelievable.
Everybody said, well, Miami had lost, I think, 3 or 4 in a row coming into that. Who cares? I mean, it was awful. And that was all about the Pacers. And it's funny. Totally. Rick kind of invited Bam went off, if you remember that game. And Bam had 3 points at the half. And then Rick got mad at the starters and benched him. And Bam, I think it was Freeman. And Bam had 12, 13 straight against Freeman. And that was his jumpstart, his springboard, if you will, to a 30-point night that Miami certainly needed on that night. That was on the heels of Spoelstra calling a timeout when he didn't have any and all that was going on there. But, yeah, it was awful. And these guys wear their emotions on their sleeve, and especially the negative emotions. And that's what Myles was alluding to on that Sunday when he talked about, exactly what went down and how he wasn't being a good teammate. That's what he was talking about.
So to wrap up with him and injuries, like I totally agree with the roll versus pop thing with him. He's taking more threes this year than last year, over 5 per game this year for the first time of his career. His 2-point percentage is the lowest it's been since 2018-19. And I think a big part of this is, one, if Haliburton can't turn the corner as often, they can blitz him easier, and then he can't hit the roll as much, so the pop's more obvious. And whoever the shooters are, because there's no Nesmith and Nembhard, Mathurin shoots well on catch and shoots, but he doesn't take him very much. So teams are willing to get off him. Siakam's the same kind of deal. So they can clog up the paint easier and block the roll. So there's just not that action is not there as easily. And it was a very high efficient thing for the Pacers last year, that duo. So I think that the numbers show that perfectly for him. Turner's had some huge games this year. Like that, a lot of people have pointed to their record when he does XYZ is like, oh, when he's good, they're good. And I kind of hate those stats because it's like, when a player makes more shots, the team is better. But there is something to that this year, certainly. And I think that injuries are a factor in that too, because of who's letting them space and how the rest of their lineup is shaken out with starting five. Last question I want to kind of broadly get to with you here is, what would it – they had 2 more at home here against crummy teams. Pistons are okay, to their credit. What would it take for you to feel better about how they're playing or what can be expected in December the rest of this week?
Got to see a good team. I want to see them beat a good team, and I want to see them get up on somebody and be relentless being up on somebody. That's what they did a number of times last year. I mean, hell, we saw it on Monday night against New Orleans. They're up 15, back down to 1. Up 17, back down to 1. I'm sick and tired of that. Listen, they had this identity often a year ago too. They played down to their competition. They're just not as good as they were a year ago to make that survivable at times. And I want to see a more consistent team. I want to see a greater pace. And I guess what I also want to see is guys healthy and guys get put back in the spots in which they had formed this roster and how they wanted to play in the offseason. And that's TJ in the second unit pushing it against the backup guard. Those guys just aren't ready for it most of the time right there. And obviously Nembhard and Nesmith back. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if Moses Brown is going to be the answer for the backup big the rest of the way or what. I know that they kind of lived on, the fact that other teams would go small so they could do Obi as a backup for Myles when he went out. But this, you have to have your guy Haliburton be the elite level player. And you mentioned how he's been here recently. I'm going to play off of that. He's got to be that. And I know it's a tall order, but again, that's why he gets paid handsomely. That's what he is. That's what he's supposed to be. So if he is not that, this team isn't going to be that, and they're going to be highly disappointing. So it starts with him. And then I think once he gets into gear, if he's able to, again, orchestrating for the rest of his teammates, that makes everybody out there better. And when you get Nesmith back, you're automatically going to be better, a little bit better, really, with both Nesmith and Nembhard on the defensive end of the floor. Not greatly better, but you're automatically going to be better. But some consistency, and again, that starts with Tyrese Haliburton. And I think without that, they're in trouble.
I like you so much, JMV, because you hit every single point I want to get to in this segment.
Well, I've got – it's funny, over the years with Myles, and see, here's the other thing we could probably spend some time on too if you wanted to, which is regarding Myles. We're coming up on a point in time where they're going to have to make some hardcore decisions, Tony, here. Yep. I mean, they are. They're going to have to make some decisions on Myles and what to do. And
if it's not a decision on Myles, it's a decision on someone else. Yeah. So that they can,
That's territory you don't want to be a part of, because that will announce with authority a massively disappointing season. And I love what they have done. I love this vision, because there are not a lot of teams out there that have that type of within your own house, build within. And we hate it around here up until this point, Tony, because the Colts always do it and it never works out. And I so wanted to see this work out for the Pacers. And to this point, we're scuffling to see it work out. So, get that thing into gear here.
So here's what I think about what would make everyone feel better. Yep. They almost had it. The Pelicans gave 27-12 in that first quarter. And I thought, oh, here it is. Finally, they're just going to kick someone's tail, man. Yeah. Dallas, they played in Dallas this year. For 48 minutes, their offense looked good that night. That was their most consistent 48 minutes of the season. They didn't defend that well that night, but they looked good the whole game. Every other game, they've had wobbly stretches. In some games, some terrible wobbly stretches. So their biggest win is 12. It was the Wizards game. Last year, they won on opening night by 23. Their very next game, they went into Cleveland and won by 12. They beat the Spurs by 41 and the Jazz by 16. That was all in their first 8 games. Yeah. Like, it was very clear that they had a peak level that was just like, they're going to crush. And the Cavs were good. Like, crush people last year if they were playing their best. And even this year, they have 2 double-digit wins. That Knicks win, that fourth quarter, very impressive, to their credit. But, like, they haven't had a just 48 minutes, punch a team, knock them down, never let up game this year. And I thought it might be coming last night against New Orleans when the first and even early second quarter, they looked just like, oh, they're way better than them. And then it became a tough game for them. And I think that would be something that makes me go, okay, they see that's the gear. Like, they have it. They haven't really had that this year at all. It's just popped up every so often. And Haliburton having a continued stretch of good play, right? It has to last the whole week for, I think, people to feel better. Don't get me wrong. It's good that he's played well, but he's had like some sort of consistency from that Boston, Dallas, Orlando stretch earlier this season. I think if he plays well the whole week, people at least go, okay, I can foresee him doing well when they go on the road. But they need both of those things for people to feel like relief about the slow start.
Yeah, I would completely agree. You got to keep in mind where we were a year ago. I'd like to see a game like they had against Boston. Remember that Monday night of the NBA Cup game where they were just up and down the floor, and it was fun as hell to watch. And that
beat them by 10. Hardest beat Boston by double digits. Yeah,
that was vaulting them into what I thought was an area to where, all right, now everybody's going to become a believer, and they backed it up against Milwaukee. And obviously, with the Lakers, didn't work out so well in that championship, but that's what we're looking for. And has one final thing, and I know you got to go here in a second. I act like I'm hosting it here. I guess we will coming up in a bit.
You're doing great. Yeah, we'll talk later.
But was there a spot where Haliburton kind of devolved into the Haliburton we know right now compared to the Haliburton we knew? Was it that injury of a year ago? I mean, I know he's certainly had moments in which, but they haven't been as consistent, dominating. Man, they've got no answer for his out there defensively type of moments. Was that the NBA catching up with him, or is that something else?
Sort of. Like, I thought in the playoffs, if they had the guy that he was in the playoffs last year, they'd probably be 11-7 right now, right? Like, he was pretty dang good then. He closed the season strong. Obviously not what he was like in the first 3 months of last year, no doubt. That player has not been seen since, really, outside of, a game here or there. But injuries, the changing dynamics we talked about with Siakam, Hield being gone, like, a lot of stuff has not made him that guy. But I think people have overblown, like, how, obviously, don't get me wrong, that, like, right after the All-Star break stretch, he was god awful, right? But people act like that's what he was the whole time after the injury. I think he had not the peak, like, All-NBA level, but he was like All-Star level for much of the time after the injury last year. But even that would be better than he has been for a lot of this year. Yeah,
they're not going to go anywhere until he's the guy that he's supposed to be. And we've seen it here, I think, in fleeting moments, just not consistent moments. And hopefully that's on the horizon.
Well, this is coming out after we'll talk, but hopefully you all tuned into JMV and heard me and him on this Tuesday. Where can people find you?
What time are you coming on today, by the way?
I'm 5 today.
5 o'clock, baby. Prime time.
I'm the late guy today. I get all the commuters. Let's go.
At JMV1070 on X. And I think my Facebook feeds into Instagram. I didn't even know I had an Instagram account. And then somebody started sending me Instagram stuff. So, yeah, I guess I'm there. And then obviously JMV at 1075thefan.com. But I'm big into basketball. I play all the time. Obviously, I've been a big supporter of Myles Turner. And I don't want to see it end this way for him here because he's fought through a lot. Hey, by the way, too, Chad Buchanan is still going to give me the offer sheet that they signed DeAndre Ayton to, and I'm gonna put it up in a frame on my wall. The offer.
He's got to do it this week. Ayton's in town on Wednesday.
I know it. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That'd be great. Exactly. Portland, DeAndre. I forgot about that. Did Myles play against Ayton last time? Yeah, you're right. That's on Wednesday. That'll be a fun night to watch my Twitter account or my X account.
When Ayton left the Suns, that matchup kind of wore off the luster for me, even though I do. I do still wonder how he thinks about that.
If you've watched Portland this year, they can turn it off. They can turn it off fairly quickly. They don't have a lot of guys that like to expend too much energy with Chauncey Billups.
They are doing a great job of showing some capable moments and still losing a lot. Good job.
I think that shows they drafted guys with athleticism and just not quite the, like Shaden Sharp is, I think, a great representative of that. Still got a lot to learn there. But we'll talk later on today on this Tuesday at 5:00. And man, you're always great, buddy. I appreciate you more than you know, Tony. You know that, and have me anytime.
Love chatting. Love chatting with you. If you need Colts thoughts too, they're going there. Here comes their easy schedule stretch. JV's also the guy for you. Thank you so much for chatting with me, guys. Thanks for listening. See you very soon.